Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight we continue our special series of interviews focused on the November 7th election with the three candidates for City Council in District 4. Joining us are Jay Higgins. Jay is chair of the Santa Barbara Planning Commission. A graduate of UCSB in environmental studies, he is the owner of the land use planning firm H&H Environmental, and he has spirited the Santa Barbara Citizens Planning Academy, a free course for residents about our history, character, planning, and environmental leadership. Next is Jim Scafide. Jim got into politics at age 7, handing out flyers for Robert F. Kennedy with his mom. In his native Ohio, he served as the youngest mayor of the town of East Liverpool. With degrees from Boston College and Harvard Law Schools, he operates his own business practice law firm in Santa Barbara. And Kristen Sneddon. Kristen is a graduate of Santa Barbara High School, go Dons, attended SBCC, then went to UCLA and earned her master's in geophysics from the Colorado School of Mines. She's been active in public and charter school activities, runs a small business providing college counseling services, and teaches environmental geology at City College. Welcome, and thank you all for coming. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having us.
Jay, let me start with you. You're the planner. I mean, we have this district election. People don't know what district they're in. People don't know what the 4th district is. It's kind of abstract. Can you describe in English what the 4th district is?
I'll do my best, and I would agree that it's not very well known process or boundaries. So, and I found that out by walking and just listening to the radio this morning. Some of our AM radio hosts did a bad job of explaining the boundaries as well. So the 4th district goes from East San Roque, right at the corner of San Roque Road and State Street, and heads generally east or south down State Street to Sola, picks up the Riviera neighborhood, lower and upper, then keeps going east, picks up the Upper East neighborhood, of course, Eucalyptus Hill, backside of the Riviera, all the way to Mountain Drive, and then picks up Eucalyptus Hill and Coast Village Road.
So it's it's the biggest district, I think.
It is geographically the largest, unless you factor in maybe some of what the airport includes in District 5. I should also mention the 4th district includes some of the foothill area as well.
All right, and Jim, there's about 14,000 people, give or take, in every district. What are the demographics of the district? When you walk, and you talked about how you're walking the whole district, who are the people? Are they homeowners, renters, long-time residents?
Well, I'd like to correct a point that you made earlier. I'm actually a native Californian, not a native Ohio.
I'm sorry, I apologize for that.
That's okay. I'm kind of proud of my native California heritage.
All right,
so.
you better check your website then, all right.
No, I'm very sure. The district is predominantly homeowners, and depending on which part of the district you're in, just like the district comprises different neighborhoods, each neighborhood, larger neighborhood, comprises blocks and their subparts. So if you talk about the Upper East, for instance, you'll have a split between a lot of renters on one part of the Upper East as opposed to homeowners on the upper side of the Upper East, if you will. So predominantly, though, beyond that, a lot of home ownership, a lot of highly educated people, a lot of higher income people actually as well. I think the minimum income is about $50,000, and it goes up from there.
Yeah. So Kristen, first of all, how do you campaign? I mean, a lot of hills to be walking on. And secondly, what's the biggest issue in the district, the biggest district issue that you hear from people when you talk to them?
Yeah, so it depends again which district, but mostly with families. There are two main issues I hear a lot, and one is that even when people own their homes, they're very concerned that their younger generation won't be able to afford to move back home. They won't be near their grandkids, issues like that. There are a lot of issues about the ADUs and secondary units in San Roque. Many people have them.
Granny units.
I don't like to call them granny units because times are changing, and so you have younger people using them, grannies using them. Yes. So different uses like that, and then of course water and fire are big concerns too. So
you agree with that, Jim? Is that what you're hearing about the most?
I hear about. First and foremost, people they're concerned about housing. That is the number one issue in Santa Barbara. I think we can all agree with that. And I think that where you are in the district depends on where your view on housing is, right? neighborhood preservation is certainly very important, but I think everybody recognizes, look, we've got between, depending on whose numbers you use, 20 to 30,000 people a year, or rather a day, commuting into the city. And if you're an environmentalist, you want to address that issue, and that can only be addressed with finding ways of creating housing that working families can afford.
What do the people want you to do, who you talk to, the voters? What's their expectation about what you're going to do at City Hall as a district?
I think that they'd like us to make the process a little bit easier, make government a little bit more transparent, bring a service mentality back to what happens at City Hall. I certainly think that ADUs and the granny flats or the accessory dwelling units is a big tie-in with fire safety. A lot of people want the right to be able to put a secondary dwelling unit on their property, but they're very concerned that the number of cars on the streets is going to make it hard for evacuation during a wildfire. And we're a district that is primarily composed of a high fire zone in that urban wildland interface.
Well, okay, let's talk about housing. That's where you all want to go. So, all right, this is a question I ask everybody. Randy Alcorn wrote a piece in Newshawk, a friend of the program. He says, there is no housing crisis in Santa Barbara, and there is no shortage of affordable housing. What there is are too many people who want to live here for a price they can't afford, and there are the forces of greed all too eager to profit by building a few affordable units, along with many more new market rate units. You agree with that? You think there's a housing crisis?
There's a housing crisis. There's definitely a housing crisis. I mean, when less than 20% of our firefighters and police force and teachers can live in the town where they serve, that's a crisis. That's a crisis for our community. Our nurses can't live here, and those are the backbone of our community. So when people who live with us and serve us cannot live here with us, it causes a divide and it hurts the whole community. There's definitely a crisis. I don't think, the part about greed, I wish there was a way to formally address it, but it used to be okay to have 20% profit margin. That was a good margin. Now it seems like 200% is what you're aiming for. So there is an overriding issue where people are trying to make even more off of real estate and property.
All right, Jim, you mentioned the ADU, the average unit size density program, which I always have to write down. So it's been producing apartments, condos, rentals, but it really high rents, over $3,000. Do you think that program is a failure?
No, I don't think it's a failure, but I don't think it's a success. Here's an interesting point. When I lived in Santa Barbara in the 1980s, I rented a one-bedroom apartment.
And you are a native of California.
Indeed I am.
I should point out.
Thank you for pointing that out. When I lived in Santa Barbara in the 1980s, I rented a one-bedroom apartment by Cottage Hospital. I paid $550 a month. All right, so if you adjust that for inflation, that's about $1,350 a month right now. It probably goes on the market right now for $1,500, $1,600 a month. So yeah, part of it is inflation. Part of it is that there is more of a demand for housing. Is there a crisis? Yeah, there's a crisis. And I'll tell you why I think there's a crisis. You know, as I said earlier, 20 to 30,000 people a day commuting in and out of the city is an indication that we have a problem. And we do need to take care of the folks that work in Santa Barbara. We will never address the housing problem per se. We'll never solve the problem, right? Think about this. How many units have been built in Goleta in the past 30 years? How has that affected property values in Santa Barbara? Not at all. Thousands of units in Goleta, housing prices are still climbing, right? I think housing costs are just going to be high. The AUD program, let's clarify that.
Well, let me ask Jay about that. First of all, crisis or no crisis, is the ADU...
AUD.
AUD.
No, I want to know,
yeah.
Is the ADU going to be effective in addressing it? And then can
Just
we
to make
do
sure-
anything about the state mandate on AUDs that protects neighborhoods?
Okay, so you want to talk about the granny flats or the apartments?
Both.
Okay, so
You're a planner. You see all this stuff. Come on.
I'm a planner. I just want to make sure we know what we're talking about. The ADU, it will help bring housing costs down.
Even with the cap.
Okay, you're talking about the apartments.
Yeah.
The AUD is
No, is there a housing crisis or not?
yes, there's a housing crisis.
Is
absolutely.
the ADU the vehicle to fix it?
Yes.
It is.
It will help, absolutely.
In the way it is now.
It will, I think anytime you can bring supply into the marketplace, that will help bring prices down a little bit. It'll never adjust to where we would like it to be. Some people that have been here for a very long time, would like us to be paying $800, $900, $1,200 a month rent for one bedroom. That's not realistic. I don't think that's realistic in Ventura.
What do you think
either.
What do you think is a realistic rent that's affordable, quote unquote?
I think realistic would be 30% of whatever your income is. So that's the statistics that planners use. That's the stats that lenders use, and so we should try to land there. We know though in Santa Barbara a lot of people spend a little bit more than 30% on their rent or their mortgage, and there's the paradise tax that we pay for living in Santa Barbara. So I think
Paradise
again,
tax, that's a good phrase.
right.
And the ADU, switching from the AUD.
Wait, you asked him about
I know,
ADUs.
is the
He is
mandate that the state forces us to allow so-called granny units, extra units, accessory units. Isn't that going to wreck the neighborhoods?
I think it will have a big effect on the neighborhoods for sure. There's no doubt about it. We can say all we want, and we can sort of abide by what the state thinks that we should be doing with regard to not thinking that parking will be a problem. We will put more cars on the street. It will have an effect on safety and evacuation routes. So can we do something about it? Sure. Santa Barbara has always been a place of achieving a very happy medium, or you could said another way, a very complicated process for land development and entitlement rights. So I'm hoping we could find a way to get to that happy medium with ADUs in high fire zones that includes parking requirements.
How concerned are voters in District 4 about the ADUs? How much do you hear about that?
I hear about it quite a bit, especially in San Roque, where there already are so many. It's
And what do they want you to do about it?
what I've been proposing that we do about it, and it seems to be going well, is that I would like to get the existing units permitted, streamline that permitting process.
Of which there are many.
Of which there are many, and dignify those units, have them be more than hot plates and refrigerator units and leaking plumbing. Have renters' rights and protections for those units. Count those units to see what our density actually is. Keep them out of the high fire zone because evacuation risks are very high there if you're having too many cars. But many of them already are handling the cars. They have long driveways, they have room for them. They're already existing. I'd like to count them, dignify them, get that permitted, decouple that permitting process from having to upgrade your entire house at the same time. If you go in and try and get a permit for your ADU, then your whole house needs to be upgraded also. So I would like to get the ADUs fixed up first, get them counted, see what the density is, and then maybe after a period of time, then go back to our regular permitting process for new.
We're talking about a state mandate that we're required to do this. You're an attorney, and so you're used to dealing with the laws. Senate Bill 35.
My favorite bill.
Just passed. 7,963 words by my count. 22 feet long.
Very dramatic. I like that. That's great.
What mandates? How many more thousands of units are we going to be required?
Well, that's the challenge, right? And so we talk about the pushback on the AUD program, and I think that when I'm talking about the average unit density bonus program, and I think that, I think that and I say legalizing, not dignifying, legalizing the existing ADU units will help us get to the numbers where we can avoid the implementation of Senate Bill 35. We're going to want to avoid the implementation of that bill. And it angers me that California has decided that they know how to manage housing better.
We're going to want to avoid it, you say?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we can't avoid it if we hit our housing numbers, and that's the challenge, right? And that's the challenge.
We're nowhere near hitting our housing numbers.
No, and we won't hit our numbers. And there'll be some sort of revision to the laws or lawsuits that'll protect, I think, what we all love about Santa Barbara, and that's the charm and the quietness. And there's a little bit of hustle and bustle that's been being ushered in on the coattails of AUD and ADU, et cetera. And we'll do our best to get to that happy medium. But I don't think that we're going to have to put up with the state mandates as they're written now.
So on the Planning Commission, when they pass something like that huge bill, do you have contact then with the state? How do you know what it is we have to do?
Well, we rely on our staff to create at least an attempt at an ordinance that will incentivize development. And then we rely again on the marketplace to come behind that and those codes to bring developers forward with the units. And a lot of those units can be met not from the private market, but certainly we have, even though redevelopment money is gone, we have low-income federal funding and state funding to build affordable units. And Santa Barbara's been very successful at that. Rob Pearson, who is working with me on my campaign, endorsing me, and has been very successful at creating affordable units, more so than I think any small town in the state of California. We're going to follow in his footsteps and be able to build affordable units with lots of federal and state money.
All right, last question on housing. The city's passed an effective ban on short-term rentals, vacation rentals, and so on. Would you agree with me, Kristen, that this is a monstrous violation of private property rights for, say, an elderly couple, I name no names, who rent their house for a couple of weeks in the summer to help afford live here? Isn't it an outrage? Aren't you outraged by this?
Well, we're talking about two different things. If it's an elderly couple who's renting out, and I know many professors at City College who do this too, and friends who rent out their own home, for 2 months out of the summer to help make ends meet, to make their mortgage.
But it has to be at least
home
30
sharing.
days, right?
Yeah, but that's a home sharing type of situation. That's not the same as someone coming in from outside,
Right.
buying up what would be first-time buyer housing stock, driving the prices up. That's a whole different situation. If you have someone buying up multiple properties and running those solely as vacation rentals, that is an outrage because it drives out our workforce.
So you're comfortable with where the city is on it now? You would support the status quo?
I would actually support, with where the overlay is of where it's allowed, I would support that if it's your own home and that you're renting it for over the 30 days or over the summer, that area could be expanded, that it's a very narrow corridor right now where that's allowed to happen.
All right, we'll put you down as a monstrous violation.
Oh, no.
Where are you on
But
this?
I don't want outside people to come
No,
and
I
buy multiple
understand, yeah.
properties.
No,
And I don't want that anywhere.
Do
I
you
don't
think
want it
that's
even
happened,
in
though?
the
Has
court.
that really happened a lot? Is there data
Yes.
to support that?
Oh yes. And I think, and even where it's allowed, I would like to not have that be allowed. I think that's,
Where are you on this, Joe?
So I think that the city's effective moratorium, if you will, probably the right thing to do in the short term, but not a long-term solution to the problem. And I do think that it does affect private property rights. Although we have to consider the fact that people have a house in a single-family district because they don't want to live in a commercial district. They don't want strangers rotating through their neighborhood. So it's a balancing act. Right now, we need every house that we can get for working families. I don't want those to be short-term rentals. And I understand that there are people that want to rent out their house for a few weeks, but as has been indicated, that's not really what the moratorium is going after.
So you're comfortable with where the city is on it now?
For
you
the
like
time being, but I
ordinance.
think it should be reviewed at least annually, right? Because if the justification for the moratorium is the housing crisis, and we're going to try to address that housing crisis through the AUD program and other programs, then we need to constantly assess, because we are talking about fundamental property rights here.
Were you involved in the?
Yes, we did. On the Planning Commission, we did listen to some short-term rental deliberations, and I'm comfortable with where we're at right now. I think that, in fact, this commercial use of residential property does peel away rental units that we desperately need. People that live in residential areas don't want to have a commercial neighbor, a hotel, despite what the many people that have used that online service to buttress their income or make extra money, and many of them do it nicely and quietly and politely. But we have a few bad apples that have caused a lot of neighborhood impacts, and you cannot ignore the fact that these things do take away rental properties and pull those off the market. Now, we may have a fight on our hands with the Coastal Commission. Allegedly, they will come after us or try to encourage us to include short-term rentals in the coastal zone. And so I think I'd be interested in that conversation, only from the standpoint of a negotiation with the Coastal Commission and to see what else we can achieved
Which has
therein.
authority within 1,000
Sure.
feet.
Generally speaking,
Yeah.
the boundary line zigs and zags. But I'd like to see that negotiation play out and see what other items we can achieve with maybe cooperating with the Coastal Commission there.
More work for lawyers. This is good. Let me ask you each about State Street. How would you describe the current economic and physical conditions of downtown State Street?
It's really declined. I mean, having lived here over 30 years and having that be a place that was welcoming and that, how it is now, homelessness is a real issue and empty storefronts are a real issue. And it's not really the hub right now that it used to be. And I know the hub sort of moves around. At one time it was La Cumbre Plaza, now it's sort of the funk zone, and it kind of migrates through. When Paseo Nuevo came, and there was a lot of excitement there then. But the way it is right now, it's just not hospitable to local people coming downtown to shop or to, I don't know, spend time with their families.
Some of the mayoral candidates told me that the decline of State Street narrative is overblown, that it's really not that big of a problem, that State Street is actually doing pretty well. What's your take on it?
I think, well, as a State Street business owner, I can say that State Street it needs some help. I disagree with those candidates. I think that what we're seeing is a trend, and the trend concerns me. There are a lot of vacancies. The downtown organization did a study and identified the reason for the vacancies, and in large part, it was a lack of coordination and a lack of businesses that service the people who live here rather than the tourists. And I think that there has to be a coordinated effort to sort of revitalize State Street. One of the things that I've been pushing for, and we talked about the other night, is at the Housing Forum, is I want to see more housing on State Street. I think that we can repurpose some of our existing buildings. The Macy's building is the example we all point to and say, this is a great opportunity for an AUD program that would provide housing for working families. If we can, so take a look at, I don't want to get into that. Take a look at Milpas, take a look at Coast Village Road, and take a look at State Street, right? Milpas, Coast Village Road, very successful because they cater to the people who live there. State Street doesn't, it's not successful. If there are more people living downtown, then you would have a more vibrant State Street.
What do you do from a planning perspective
I
to
think
fix
we have,
State Street?
I think we have to be very careful with regard to housing on State Street. It sure seems exotic. We don't do exotic very well in the planning department and in our.
But it's the buzzy issue.
It sure is. There are a lot of people that like to live above retail. A lot of those people probably won't live there full time, so we have to be careful about people coming in and maybe having a timeshare or something like that effectively with mixed use retail. I think that's something that we can look at, but we have to be careful to protect our tax base. And we have a huge retail tax base on State Street. And it does it need to be adjusted? Sure. Can we put some more housing in the Central Business District without it affecting State Street? Yes, absolutely. In that regard, AUD has been, well, it hasn't been a failure. It just hasn't hit the marks that we thought it would. A lot of the housing associated with AUD has ended up in the outer neighborhoods when we really need it downtown where there are parking lots that can accommodate this perceived parking shortage.
But isn't brick and mortar retail dead? Hasn't Amazon just kind of ruined that?
No, I don't think it's dead, not at all. And it better not be dead, otherwise we really need to redo our budget because we are relying heavily on sales tax income revenue for the foreseeable future.
You support the 1 cent sales tax increase that's on the Measure C?
I do. I wouldn't have, if I had been part of the planning process, that isn't how I would have come up with handling the budget shortfall on that, but as it stands and that's what's on the table, I do support it
Yes,
because
so you're for Measure
I am.
C. You for
I am.
Measure
Yes,
C?
I'm for Measure C. I wish it had been earmarked, but it's not. So hopefully they'll hold the city council accountable because half the city council is up every 2 years. I think it needs a good infrastructure. I think we need, our district especially needs a lot of infrastructure. Sidewalks, roadways really need a lot of help in the 4th.
I found your answer on Measure C to the chamber questionnaire a little unclear. Are you for it or against it?
I am, unfortunately, would rather have it be earmarked specifically for a purpose like the police department. So I think we would have done a better service to our residents had we said, this is where the money's going. It's 66% approval against the police department, fixed for sure. And then we don't have to talk about that anymore. And that's $10 million a year, right? So if we want to spend another $10 million a year on XYZ infrastructure projects, we could have done that. But we didn't.
And you think we would have got that vote, the 2/3 vote?
If we would have, I'm campaigning very hard to get a lot of votes. I don't know why the city couldn't.
So are you in favor of Measure C or not?
I think I answered that question.
No. Is that,
You're putting words in my mouth?
No, I'm asking you.
If you
Yes or
do,
no.
I'm going
It's
to
a
put my
yes or
glasses
no.
on again.
It's a yes or no question, is it? Yes?
I am hopeful that we have the money we need to do what we want to do. We have a lot of bills to pay and a lot of infrastructure to build and rebuild.
Are you going to vote yes or no on Measure A?
You can come on over and we can fill out the ballot together.
All right, speaking of city finances, you suggested, again, I got this in the chamber questionnaire, that the council should look for more ways to contract out services as was done
Sure,
at the
yeah.
municipal golf course. Do you think that the city payroll should be reduced, that the city workforce should be reduced?
I think we're going to have to head that direction gradually over time. There's no doubt about it. We do a lot of contract work already in the planning and building department. We contract out plan check services. There's a saying at the planning commission, or maybe a quiet saying that not so quiet anymore. Anytime you want something done at the planning department, it's 2 years and a consultant. So we have very talented planning staff, yet we continue to farm out a lot of complex work, and so we're already doing it.
Gee, we're running out of time. I'm sorry, we could go on forever. Take a minute and just tell the voters of District 4 why you're the best candidate.
Okay, where do I? Okay. Over here? Okay, I'm a different candidate. I'm coming from a science background, and my specialty really is in groundwater and landslides and fire safety mitigations, and planning for the future for our changing climate is actually really important to our whole community for our future. I'm also been a longtime resident of the community and very involved in the community in charter schools and in City College and in education. I'm experienced and I care very deeply about our city.
Thank you. Jim?
Where am I looking? Okay. So I've been endorsed by the Democratic Party of the county, the Women's Democratic of Santa Barbara, the Democrat Women of Santa Barbara, the Women's Political Committee, the UCSB Dems. All these people in these organizations, the Realtors Association, endorsed me because of my vision for Santa Barbara. I have experience, I understand the law, I understand the operations of city government, and I want to work on 4 major issues. Those 4 major issues are diversifying the economy, protecting the environment, protecting our neighborhoods, and creating housing for working families. And it was for those reasons that these organizations with thousands of members gave me their endorsement, and I would appreciate the voters' consideration as well.
Jay Higgins?
Thanks, Jerry. You know, we're at am I here? We're at a pivotal point in Santa Barbara, and it seems like we are perpetually at that point. But right now, with district elections, it's even more important that we elect the right people to the city council. We have a disconnect between our fundamentals and our vision right now, and that when that happens, we see impacts to our neighborhoods and our streets and our roads and our police department. There's no reason why we should be continuing to talk about funding a police department headquarters for 20 years. And so I'm hoping to get your vote so that we can get back to business and really make hard decisions that have been too long ignored, and take care of State Street, take care of our water bills, and bring families back to State Street.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to our guests, Kristen Sneddon, Jim Scafide, and Jay Higgins. And as a voter in the 4th District, I have to say this is a very impressive group, and it's a tough choice. And I commend you all for running.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Giving your talents to the city. And thank you for watching. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, or you can check out my blog post on the campaign and find our entire series of interviews with the candidates for mayor and district council seats. Thanks to our director, Oscar De La Renta Gutierrez, to our crew, Andrew, Ryan, and Josue, our marketing and branding consultant, and as ever, our high-powered senior executive producer, Hap Freund. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.